This video I want to speak about the topic of the hungry martial artist. I just started thinking about this. I want to share my thoughts. I think there's an aspect to it that's very important to understand. I think when it comes to fighting, no matter if it's a martial artist or even a fighter, it's kind of like a lion. Like a lion will only hunt when he's hungry. If he's not hungry, he's pretty lazy. Like he just sits around, chills. But when he's hungry, he's vicious. He's gonna kill, find prey to eat, because then he won't live. So that hunger is very important. Aspect to him becoming aggressive and violent. So when you talk about fighters, they talk about, like, for example, the fight that just passed with Ronda Rousey and Nunes. They said that Rousey's just not hungry, but Nunes was hungry, and that's why she just got demolished. Nunes is from Brazilian, and Brazil, the country, is a poor country compared to America. And she's not just fighting for herself, but she's fighting for her country. And when she doesn't have money like Rousey, she doesn't have fame like Rousey. All she does is train to prepare for the fight, where Rousey is just basically living a comfortable lifestyle. She's famous, she's rich, she's getting opportunities in Hollywood, opportunities in WWE. She's just like playing, being in commercials, being in movies, being in television shows, and she's not a hungry fighter. She's just fighting as like a side job. But Amanda is just a full-time fighter because that's all she does. And that's why she just demolished Rousey. She was hungry. And that's kind of what I wanted to illustrate, is that where's that hunger come from? And that hunger, a lot of times it comes out of poverty. So you got somebody like Pacquiao from the Philippines. Philippines is like a poor country compared to America. So he has that hunger to be the best so that he can make money for his country and for himself. And it's even said that the fight that he had with Mayweather, he donated a lot of the money to build homes for people in the Philippines. So he's trying to fight his way out of poverty for his country. The exact opposite might be Mayweather, growing up in a boxing family, living in America, and being like multi-millionaire, multi-billionaire. But that hunger is what is a driving force for these fighters. And for the martial artists, it's like the hunger is not there unless his life is on the line. His life is on the line, then that energy comes out to protect himself. But other than that, if his life is not on the line, there's no hunger, because a martial artist is not greedy. He's not greedy for money. He knows when enough is enough. So he's not gonna be greedy. So he's not gonna be fighting to the best of his ability for money. He'll find other ways to make money. He's content with that. So he doesn't have that hunger. Another thing is, martial artists are grounded in love. So they might be in a relationship where there's a lot of love. And when there's love, there's no energy for violence. When your life is filled with love, you don't have energy for violence. So martial artists can't fight just for the sake of fighting, because they're not violent people. So they're not violent, they're not greedy. But they can fight, but only when their life is at risk. So it's a totally different aspect. But a fighter, a cage fighter, a boxer, they need to be hungry. So they need to be greedy, or they need to be violent, where they maybe have no love. So Mike Tyson would be an example where he grew up with no love. Customato took him in, and then Customato died. But he had no love in his life. You know, had very turbulent relationships with the woman in his life. You know, where woman would, you know, he would be in and out of jail. You know, women are accusing him of rape and things like that, and domestic violence. So Mike Tyson didn't live a life of love. So he had a lot of anger, sadness, depression, and it would come out in violence within the boxing ring. He was also bullied a lot as a child. So he had a lot of anger, aggression, and violence in him. And then also combine that with the greed for money, and then that breeds like a very violent animal that you could throw into the boxing ring to destroy somebody for profit. But that's not a martial artist. Muhammad Ali had hunger because he lived in a time where there was a lot of racism. He was like the first black, one of the very first black boxers, and he had to fight against racism. So he wasn't just fighting just for money. You know, he was fighting against oppression, fighting against racism, fighting not just for himself, but fighting for his people. So that's where his hunger came from to be as great as he was. Pacquiao has the hunger from being in a poor country in the Philippines. You know, fighting, trying to fight, you know, to get his country out of poverty. You know, and it's the same thing with what's happening with Brazil, even though I really strongly dislike the whole Gracie family and everything, but they are from Brazil in a way fighting to get Brazil out of poverty. So then making martial arts a big thing, or cage fighting a big thing in Brazil, generates a lot of income for their family and for that country. And same thing with Nunes and all the Brazilians that are successful in the cage. And then also with the Mexicans and the Hispanics that are successful in boxing. Mexico is considered more of a poor country compared to America. So you got a lot of Hispanics fighting really hard to fight out of poverty. So when a person is poor and he's doesn't have much, like not much material possessions, he's poor, that's when he becomes hungry. That's when he wants to fight himself out of poverty, and that becomes the birth of a fighter in combat sport. But that's not martial arts. You know, that's like breeding a wild animal. And then you might have runners, marathon runners from Kenya or Africa. They'll go around to different marathons to win $100,000 or whatnot for winning the marathon. They're hungry for that money because they're coming from a very poor country and they're running for their whole lives to win that money for their country. So a lot of this is based on that hunger, you know, and that's what breeds these fighters. But when it comes to a martial artist is not hungry, because he knows when enough is enough. He doesn't live in excess. So he's not a greedy person, so you can't use money to motivate him to fight. The only way that you can really get him to fight to his optimum is when you put his life at risk. But other than that, he doesn't have that hunger that a fighter has. And that's why to try to compare a martial artist to a fighter is incomparable. You know?